He escorted a weeping girl home in the rain, oblivious to her status as a millionaire fleeing an arranged marriage. The rain descended in unyielding torrents, enveloping the city in a veil of water and wind. Streetlights flickered amidst the tempest, and puddles sprawled across the sidewalks like reflections of disorder. David Carter hunched his shoulders beneath the burden of his hooded jacket as he hurried home from his late shift at the public library, his bag laden with overdue paperwork and an umbrella that had already succumbed to damage midway through the journey. With each step, the walk thumped against his hip. He had just passed the intersection of 5th and Holston when a sound pierced through the storm, a scream, sharp and filled with panic. He froze. It came again, high-pitched and desperate, a woman. Without hesitation, David turned down a narrow alley. The rain obscured his vision, but he could discern a figure stumbling in the distance. A young woman, soaked and disoriented, her coat torn at the sleeve, hair matted to her face, running from two men in dark suits who surged forward behind her. With movements rigid and deliberate, one of the men shouted, "Stop!" The woman cried out, "Get away from me!" Her breath was labored as her feet splashed through puddles. David's instincts surged, prompting him to position himself at the entrance of the alley, obstructing her path. "Hey," he called out, "what's happening?" The woman collided with him, nearly losing her balance, her fingers clutching his coat in fear. "Please," she gasped, her eyes wide with terror. "Don't let them take me." The suited men decelerated, approaching with caution. "This doesn't concern you," one of them stated coolly. "It's a family matter, step aside." David's gaze shifted between the woman and the two men, her trembling lips betraying a fear that transcended mere apprehension. He squared his shoulders and declared, "I do not know who you believe yourselves to be, but I will not permit you to abduct her into the night." "Sir," the second man cautioned, reaching into his coat, "you are meddling in matters beyond your comprehension." That was sufficient. David seized the woman's hand and commanded, "Run." They dashed forward, rain pelting their faces as they navigated the alleyways. David's thoughts raced as swiftly as his feet. He recalled every turn from his childhood in this neighborhood, the shortcut behind the bakery, the wooden fence adjacent to the old record shop. The men were in close pursuit, panting heavily. David pulled the girl into a narrow service stairwell beside an abandoned bookstore. She stumbled, grasping his shoulder, her breath unsteady. "This way," he urged, and they squeezed through a fractured metal door and into a dimly lit storeroom. The air was permeated with the scent of damp wood and dust. David closed the door behind them just as footsteps reverberated outside. He crouched, regaining his breath, while she leaned against the wall, trembling. "Are you injured?" he inquired. She shook her head, replying, "I don't believe so." David removed his drenched jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "I am David," he stated. "You need not disclose anything, but I must ensure your safety." "I am aware of a location," she whispered. "It is not distant." They remained still until the footsteps diminished, then discreetly exited through the rear. Emma navigated a labyrinth of alleys to a dilapidated laundromat adorned with a flickering neon sign. She unlocked a side door using a small key retrieved from her boot. The warmth within was almost jarring. She directed him to a cramped storage room at the back, furnished with a cot, a desk, and a small heater emitting a soft hum. "Is this where you have been residing?" he inquired. She nodded, brushing wet hair from her face. "Temporary," she murmured. He felt compelled to pose questions. Who were those men? Why were they pursuing her? What was she fleeing from? However, he saw something in her look indicating that she had been responding to inquiries throughout her existence. Instead, he retrieved a towel from the corner shelf and crouched beside the heater, asking, "Do you have a name?" He inquired gently. She paused before meeting his gaze. "Emma," he acknowledged, recognizing the name Lancaster from newspapers and real estate towers. Yet he remained silent. "Emma," he reiterated softly, "you are safe now." She regarded him as if she wished to accept it, and for the first time that evening, she allowed herself to exhale. The rain had ceased by morning, leaving the streets pristine and shimmering in the early light. In the laundromat's back room, the air remained humid, yet the heater emitted a soft hum as Emma stirred a pot of oatmeal on a compact electric stove. David entered, rubbing the back of his neck, freshly showered from the staff locker room at the library across the street. He halted upon seeing her. "You didn't have to cook," he remarked. She glanced over her shoulder and offered a faint smile. "You permitted me to stay. I wished to assist." He observed her for a moment, barefoot, sleeves rolled up, her face illuminated by the morning light. She appeared to be someone who belonged, yet simultaneously, someone who had never truly belonged anywhere. They dined in silence, not awkward, but merely subdued. Subsequently, she insisted on tidying up. David had never witnessed his shelves so meticulously organized, with his books alphabetized and his mismatched mugs arranged like soldiers. She procured a rag and commenced dusting areas he had long neglected, forgotten existed. "Are you consistently this meticulous?" He teased Emma, who responded with a half-laugh. "It helps me think." He refrained from pressing further. That was their unspoken agreement. He did not inquire, and she did not fabricate. That afternoon, she sat by the window, curled up with a substantial paperback from David's bookshelf, consuming the pages as if famished for words. "I forgot how much I missed reading," she murmured. "You are welcome to any book here," he replied, "even those with coffee stains." She smiled and inquired, "How did you come to work in a library?" David reclined in his chair, extending his legs. "My mother used to take me to the library every weekend. It was our tradition, even when we had limited means." Emma gazed at him as he continued. "She passed away when I was 16, and after that, I suppose books became the only medium through which I could still hear her voice." Emma remained silent, observing him with unguarded eyes. "That's her," he added softly, gesturing toward a small photo frame on the shelf, which contained a black-and-white image of a woman. In the bookstore, laughter emanated from something just outside the frame. Emma Rose approached and delicately lifted the frame, her fingers lingering on the glass. "She looks kind," she whispered. David said she was kind, stubborn, and too good for the life she had. Emma gazed at the photo, her breath hitching. For the first time since David had met her, her composure faltered, not from fear or pressure, but from a deeper emotion. Her voice trembled. "No one has ever spoken about their mother like that in front of me." David frowned slightly, concerned. "Hey, are you well?" She turned away, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered, covering her mouth with the back of her hand. David crossed the room in 2 strides. He didn't touch her, he merely stood nearby. "You need not apologize." "I don't cry," she replied, her lips quivering. "Not for me, not like this." He waited, and then the tears emerged, not violent or dramatic, but rather quiet, aching sobs that trembled her shoulders. David handed her a tissue wordlessly. She accepted it gratefully, perched on the edge of the couch as if fearful of succumbing to despair. When she finally raised her gaze, her cheeks were moist, yet her eyes appeared clearer. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For refraining from inquiring about questions to which I lack answers." He offered her a weary yet genuine smile. At times, individuals do not require answers, merely space. Emma observed him intently for the first time and, in that instant, comprehended an emotion she had never anticipated experiencing amidst turmoil in an unfamiliar setting, clad in another's sweater. The subsequent Saturday, the sky was overcast yet tranquil, dense clouds lingering low, foretelling rain while refraining from releasing it. David checked the weather application on his phone and shrugged. It could be worse. Emma stood in the doorway, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Where are we going?" "You'll see," he remarked with a slight grin. "It's not extravagant." "I don't require extravagance," she responded, then added with a tentative smile, "Not anymore." They ambled side by side through narrow streets until they arrived at a bustling intersection nestled between rows of aged brownstones. Music emanated from a crackling speaker nearby, and the aroma of sautéed onions and fried dough permeated the air. Emma's eyes widened as she absorbed the scene before her, a modest weekend flea market adorned with tents. Tables adorned with mismatched colors displayed an array of items, including vintage books, hand-knit scarves, and chipped porcelain figurines. Children dashed by with sticky fingers, while a dog barked joyfully beside a stall selling roasted corn. Absent were designer shoes and velvet ropes. Instead, there were simply people engaged in their lives. David purchased 2 steaming cups of chai tea from a stand operated by an elderly woman who greeted him by name. She knows you, Emma remarked, amused. I used to assist her in carrying her boxes when I was a teenager, he responded, handing her a cup. She makes the finest tea in the city, Emma. She took a sip and blinked. You are not mistaken, he remarked as they ambled slowly, pausing to examine peculiar trinkets. Emma picked up a diminutive brass elephant and examined it in her hand. My mother would never permit me to visit places like this, she stated, avoiding his gaze. Too filthy, too perilous, too mundane. You do not appear to be the type who would object to the mundane, David remarked gently. Emma shook her head, stating, I believe I have been seeking it my entire life. They shared fried dumplings from a food cart, standing shoulder to shoulder beneath a string of vibrant lanterns. Emma licked sauce from her thumb, laughing as David handed her a napkin with mock seriousness. As they approached the market's conclusion, the first drop of rain struck Emma's cheek. She looked upward. We may want to seek shelter, David suggested, already scanning the nearby storefronts. They ducked beneath the awning of a closed establishment. As the rain commenced in earnest, the world became enveloped in mist, softening its edges. Laughter resonated, muffled by the bustling market crowd as vendors hastily covered their goods. In the ensuing quiet, they stood side by side, steam rising from the remnants of their tea. Emma crossed her arms, shivering slightly. Without a word, David shrugged off his jacket and draped it gently over her shoulders. You'll get cold, she protested softly. I'll manage, he replied with a smile. She gazed at him intently, her eyes deepening in the gray light. You're unlike anyone I've ever known. David raised an eyebrow and inquired, Is that a positive attribute? She replied, It's a genuine quality. You exhibit kindness without ulterior motives. Leaning against the wall beside her, he remarked, Shouldn't that be the norm? She whispered, It should be, but it isn't. Grasping the edges of his jacket, she inhaled the subtle fragrance of soap and aged paper. After a prolonged silence, she uttered something so softly that he nearly overlooked it. You are the first person who hasn't inquired about my origins. He turned to her slowly, stating, Because I anticipated you would inform me when you were prepared. Emma blinked rapidly, as if skeptical of the warmth blossoming in her chest. Her lips parted, yet no words emerged. Instead, she rested her head against the brick wall, gazing at the rain. I once believed freedom entailed being anywhere but home, she remarked. Now, I contemplate that perhaps it is merely being in a place where one need not justify oneself. David gazed at her for an extended moment before nodding. You owe no one an explanation. The rain subsided into a delicate drizzle, and the ambient light transformed into a silvery hue. She turned to him, her voice scarcely above a whisper. Do you truly mean that? I would not say it if I did not, he replied. She smiled, a subtle yet genuine expression that transcended mere lips, igniting warmth in a long-buried place. In that ephemeral moment, beneath the gentle rain and the flickering lights of a closing market, Emma experienced a sensation she had long forgotten, the initial stirrings of something profound. The following week, the first genuine sunlight in days illuminated the home. Emma Hood, her hood pulled low over her face, traversed the corner market with a canvas tote in hand. She moved swiftly, attempting to avoid drawing attention. Grocery shopping was a mundane task, yet for her, it felt akin to walking a tightrope. David had inquired if she required anything before departing for the library that morning. She had assured him she was fine, and she had meant it until she encountered her own visage on a newspaper stand outside the deli. Missing, Emma Lancaster, 25. Harris has extended a reward to the Lancaster Holdings Empire family for information regarding an old photograph from a gala, in which she donned a silver gown and a smile that failed to reach her eyes, yet was undeniably her. A woman exiting the deli observed the newspaper, and then Emma, her gaze narrowing. Emma swiftly turned, her heart racing, and hurried away, not pausing until she reached David's apartment. The key slipped from her grasp as her vision blurred. She barely managed to enter before her knees gave way, leaving her breathless. She was aware they were searching for her, and someone had spotted her, bringing peril to the sole individual who had offered her unconditional kindness. The decision to depart arose instinctively. By the time David returned from work, Emma had packed half of her belongings into a duffel bag. The books she had borrowed were neatly arranged on the table, accompanied by an unfinished note. He entered quietly, pausing upon seeing her by the window, gripping the strap of her bag. Initially, he remained silent, observing her as her hands trembled. "Where are you going?" he inquired finally, his voice composed. She froze, her voice faltering. "I have to." He stepped closer. "Why?" "I can't explain." He shook his head. "Try." She turned toward him, her eyes glistening with tears she had suppressed all afternoon. "Because they're searching for me. Because I don't belong here. Because you don't know who I truly am." David remained silent, his expression inscrutable. Emma dropped her bag, took a trembling breath, and whispered, "Because I'm afraid that when you discover the truth, you'll perceive me differently." David furrowed his brows. "Emma." She averted her gaze, her voice trembling. "My name is Emma Lancaster." The name resonated ominously. David exhaled slowly. He had suspected, but hearing it from her lips altered everything. She braced for judgment, for anger, for him to retreat, yet he remained still. "I know who the Lancasters are," he finally stated. "I also know that does not diminish what you have done for this place or what you have meant to me." Emma's eyes widened. "You are not angry." "I am confused," he admitted, "but not angry." Her shoulders sagged then. Tears flowed uncontrollably as I grappled with the truth. I had never experienced genuine kindness without ulterior motives, and I feared its cessation. David approached, delicately raising her chin, inquiring if she was apprehensive about his perception of her. She affirmed, her lips quivering, expressing her dread of having irrevocably damaged their connection. He grasped her hand reassuringly, asserting she had not. Emma gazed into his eyes, exposed and devoid of her previous defenses, confessing her fear. This time, she was emotionally invested. "Someone is contemplating my existence. I hold affection for you." His hand gently clasped hers. Then he urged, "Do not flee." In the ensuing silence, as the final rays of daylight permeated the windowsill, she permitted herself to entertain the notion that perhaps she need not escape. The kettle emitted a soft whistle in the background, yet neither of them stirred. Emma perched at the edge of the worn sofa, her fingers interlaced tightly in her lap, while David stood across the room, leaning against the counter with arms crossed and jaw clenched. "I should have disclosed this to you earlier," she uttered, her voice scarcely audible. David did not respond immediately. The silence that enveloped them had shifted from its previous comfort to a weighty tension, laden with unspoken sentiments. Emma gazed upward, scrutinizing his expression for understanding, forgiveness, or any semblance of connection, yet she sensed an increasing chasm between them. "My true name is Emma Grace Lancaster," she declared, "the sole daughter of Charles Lancaster, CEO of Lancaster Holdings." David blinked slowly, processing what he had long suspected but never fully accepted. He nodded once, yet his expression remained unchanged. "They want me to marry a man named Andrew Whitmore," she continued. "It's a merger disguised as a wedding, contracts instead of vows. My father believes it will secure billions." David furrowed his brows but refrained from interrupting. "I never loved him. I never even chose him," she stated. "The engagement was announced without my consent, and when I objected, they made it clear I had no choice." Her voice. She was distressed and gazed at her hands, prompting me to flee. He advanced toward her but halted, stating gently, "You do not owe me an apology." Emma looked up, taken aback. "However, I must also be candid with you," David continued. "I am not angry. I am attempting to comprehend." She nodded slowly. "I do not belong to your world, Emma," he stated. "I am burdened by books. I exist from paycheck to paycheck. I have devoted the majority of my life striving to feel adequate for anyone, and on most days, I still do not." Her throat constricted. "I am not apprehensive about your origins," David remarked softly. "I fear that one day you will return to it, and when you do, there will be no space for someone like me." Emma rose, her eyes brimming with a fierce and raw intensity. "Do you believe I desire to revert to that existence?" "I do not know," he replied, "but I have witnessed its effects on individuals and on love." She advanced a step closer. "David, I have been surrounded by individuals who possessed wealth, influence, and status remained unfulfilled. Then I encountered you. You remained silent, yet offered me a couch to rest upon while I was a stranger in the rain. You shared your literature, your narratives, your tranquility, and never once demanded that I alter my identity. Her voice faltered. You were the first to perceive me, not by my name or legacy, but as my true self. David's demeanor softened, yet he restrained himself. Emma advanced another step, stating, I am not requesting that you transform. I cherish your authentic self. His eyes widened slightly. Startled, she murmured her uncertainty about the future, expressing her desire not to confront it in solitude. She yearned for a singular life of her own design, and her continued belief in love, despite past tribulations, was attributed to him. David struggled to maintain composure as emotion constricted his throat. For an instant, they remained motionless, two individuals from divergent realms, poised in the delicate balance between trepidation and optimism. He then grasped her hand and stated, You mentioned your reluctance to return, so do not. Emma's eyes glimmered as he approached. Stay here, remain with me. Whatever this is, we will resolve it together. She exhaled a breath she had not recognized, she was holding, and nodded. David gently enveloped her in his embrace, and for the first time in days, the tension dissipated from her shoulders. She rested her head against his chest, attuned to the steady cadence of his heartbeat. It was inconsequential that the world outside was tumultuous and intricate. Within this modest apartment above a laundromat, in the arms of someone who perceived her clearly, Emma experienced a profound sensation. Emma had perpetually yearned for freedom, not from individuals or locations, but the liberty to love and receive love in return. The duffel bag rested by the door, partially zipped and prepared. The plan was straightforward. Depart before dawn, take the train north, and vanish into a more tranquil environment. A friend of David's owned a cabin 2 towns away, secluded and secure, though not indefinitely, merely long enough to contemplate, to breathe, to determine their subsequent course of action. Emma stood by the window, her fingers twitching with anxious energy. She had never experienced such liberation or such trepidation. David entered from the hallway, still in his. A library jacket adorned her, and she offered a reassuring smile. The train departs in 45 minutes. Are you certain about this? She nodded, affirming, I am certain. I have never been more certain. However, freedom often eludes one the moment trust is placed in it. They did not notice the black SUV until it abruptly halted beside the curb. The doors swung open, and men in suits emerged, familiar faces Emma had wished to avoid. Run! David shouted as he grasped her hand, and they rushed down the alley behind the laundromat, maneuvering around puddles. Trash bins obstructed the path, but the men were swifter. David urged Emma on. Proceed through the fence. He cried as he exited the bakery's loading dock. Emma turned to protest, but in that moment, one of the guys caught up, while another grabbed at David, forcefully pushing him against the alley wall. His skull struck the masonry, causing him to slump, blood mixed with the rain. David, Emma shouted, attempting to reach him, as 2 arms encircled her from behind, restraining her. No, let me go, David. He remained inert while her voice fractured into sobs. She kicked and thrashed. However, it proved futile. The men loaded her into the SUV, forcefully closed the door, and accelerated into the night. The mansion was excessively bright, immaculate, and frigid. They removed her clothing, which still bore the scent of David's jacket, and replaced it with silk and lace. They seized her phone, laptop, and even the small bracelet David had gifted her at the flea market, which he had remarked resembled her, imperfect, yet genuine. For days, Emma wept, pleading for information regarding David's survival, but no one provided her with answers. She remained by her bedroom window, gazing outside. Amidst the manicured hedges and fountains, all she could perceive was his blood staining the alley bricks. Her mother, who had visited once, placed a firm hand on her shoulder and stated coldly, You will marry Andrew. You will smile, and this family will be rid of scandal. Emma remained silent. What could she articulate? She was ensnared in the very castle she had been taught to regard as home. The date was established, the guest list finalized, and the dress tailored. She stood like a specter before the mirror, makeup concealing the hollows beneath her eyes, her hair curled and pinned into place. Despite her flawless updo, the void in her expression was unmistakable. Internally, She was in turmoil while externally, she presented a smile for the cameras. When the priest inquired if she accepted Andrew Whitmore as her lawful husband, her mouth parted and a breath hitched in her throat. Her gaze scanned the crowd, but David was absent. Thus, she uttered the sole word she could muster, yes. The ballroom radiated with opulence, illuminated by golden crystal chandeliers, as numerous cameras captured the moment while Emma Lancaster stood at the altar, adorned in ivory silk, enveloped in silence. Her hands quivered within lace gloves. Her eyes, though impeccably adorned, appeared lifeless. She gazed directly at the officiant, ignoring the man beside her. Andrew Whitmore, polished and self-assured, stood erect in his tailored tuxedo, his smile rigid and contrived. The room hummed with subdued anticipation, filled with business magnates, politicians, and celebrities seated in velvet rows, whispering about the union of two empires, the marriage of wealth and power. However, Emma perceived none of this, only the reverberation of her heartbeat and the haunting whisper in her mind, "Run." He stated that she had not encountered David since the alley, and she was uncertain of his existence. All she knew was that she had dreamt of his eyes every night since. The officiant cleared his throat, proclaiming, "We gather today to witness the joining of two souls." Emma scarcely inhaled as he continued reading, his voice reverberating off the marble walls. Just as he reached the final line, "If anyone here has reason this union should not proceed, speak now." The back doors swung open, eliciting a collective gasp from the room as a figure entered, drenched from the rain, clad in wet clothing. Emma, with a thin bandage wrinkled above one brow and a split lip, fixed her gaze solely on David. Her breath caught as she raised her hands to her mouth. Although he walked with a slight limp, his steps remained steady and purposeful, never diverting his gaze from her. Andrew advanced, seething with anger, questioning who permitted David's entry. The guards reacted too late. Emma was already sprinting down the aisle, her veil billowing behind her, tears streaming down her face. She reached David and enveloped him in her arms, weeping against his chest, and he embraced her. He embraced her as if she might disappear once more. "You're alive," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're truly here." "I told you," he replied, tightening his grip. "I would find you." Cameras clicked, journalists clamored, and the crowd surged. Someone summoned security, yet neither of them budged. They turned in unison to confront the assembly, hands still intertwined. A reporter advanced, microphone raised. "Mr. Carter, what are you doing here? This is a private event." David's voice was firm and clear. "I am here because the woman I love is being coerced into something she never chose." More flashes of murmurs transformed into cacophony. David asserted that she was not fleeing from a marriage. Rather, she was pursuing freedom. Another voice, belonging to Charles Lancaster himself, interjected from the front row, declaring, "You have no idea what you are discussing. Step away from my daughter before this escalates into a legal issue." Emma advanced, her voice unwavering, stating, "I am not your business transaction. I am not your investment. I am your daughter." Her father paled, while her mother averted her gaze. David gently clasped her hand, and then, before hundreds, he turned to Emma and uttered the words no one. "I anticipated that she does not belong in my realm. I recognize this. I shelve books and reside in a studio above a laundromat, while she hails from opulence, authority, and all that I shall never attain." He glanced at the cameras and then back at her, "Yet none of that is pertinent, for she is not merely outside my world. She embodies it." The room fell silent. Emma's throat constricted, but she compelled herself to articulate, "If I must choose between diamonds and dinner tables, between legacy and love," she turned to David, "I choose the man who held my hand in the rain when I had nothing." Her mother's hand quivered on the pew as her father proclaimed, "If you exit that door with him, you are no longer a Lancaster." Emma's heart raced as she replied, "I do not need to be a Lancaster. I merely need to be myself." She grasped David's hand, and together they turned, without a glance back, and rushed down the aisle, pushing through the grand doors into the tempest outside. The rain greeted them like an old companion, and this time they did not flee to evade. They sprinted to embrace life. The heavy wooden doors slammed shut. As Emma and David surged into the tempest, rain cascaded in torrents, drenching them almost instantaneously. However, neither faltered. Emma discarded her heels mid-stride, seized the hem of her gown, and sprinted barefoot down the marble steps. David's laughter resonated, rich and hearty, prompting Emma to join in, breathless and exhilarated, her hand clasping his like a vital tether. They dashed past astonished valets, bewildered security personnel, and perplexed wedding attendees, splashing through puddles and reflections of a life she had just abandoned. The surroundings melded into a blur of motion and rain, yet amidst the chaos. As their hands intertwined, clarity enveloped them in the desolate plaza. David halted, drawing her into his embrace. "You're drenched," he remarked, sweeping wet strands of hair from her visage. "I am indifferent," she murmured, her eyes radiant amidst the raindrops. He smiled, tucking a strand of her veil behind her ear. "What is our next destination?" Emma tilted her head back, laughing towards the heavens, then proclaimed at the top of her lungs, her voice resonating through the tempest, "I am no longer a princess. I am myself, and I choose you." David gazed at her, taken aback. Then they kissed in the middle of the street beneath a sky filled with joyful tears while the city clamored around them. It was chaotic, damp, and flawless. A kiss not of fairy tales, but of two genuine individuals who had struggled for their right to love. 2 years later, the town of Bellage, situated among rolling hills and flower-adorned fences, had discreetly embraced a new couple and their young son into its tranquil cadence. The bell above the door of Theo's corner bookshop chimed as Emma cleaned the front window, humming to the jazz record playing in the background. The sunlight streamed into the back room, illuminating the dust motes in the air. From the children's corner, a familiar voice emerged. David sat cross-legged on a rug, reading aloud from a picture book. His hair was slightly grayer at the temples, and his voice exuded warmth. He read, "No matter where we go, home is where the heart is," glancing up at the little boy in his lap, who, though barely 2, possessed his mother's eyes and his father's curiosity. The child clapped his chubby hands and pointed at the pictures, exclaiming, "Bear, go home." "That's right," David affirmed. David remarked while kissing the top of his head. Emma leaned against the doorframe, her heart so full it ached. There were no security gates or press conferences, only books, laughter, and the aroma of cinnamon rolls from the adjacent bakery. Their life was uncomplicated, yet every aspect belonged to them. A knock resonated at the door, and Emma turned, startled to see a familiar Blacktown car parked outside. From it emerged 2 figures, her parents. Charles Lancaster stood a few feet behind his wife, his expression inscrutable, while her mother was elegantly attired. Emma, as always, clutched a small bouquet of daisies, her heart racing as she froze. David glanced up, their eyes locking across the shop. He stood slowly, Theo still cradled in his arms. Her mother approached first, tentatively stating, "We thought we'd stop by, if that's acceptable." Emma swallowed hard, nodding in affirmation. Her mother silently handed her the flowers, and then leaned down to observe Theo, remarking on his fame. Theo, ever amiable, extended a hand and greeted her with a cheerful hi. A soft, uncertain laugh escaped Emma's chest until her father stepped forward, appearing noticeably older. Somehow undeterred yet subdued, he gazed at Theo for an extended moment before gradually kneeling and extending his arms. "May I?" he inquired. Emma hesitated, then acquiesced. David tenderly transferred Theo to Charles Lancaster, the man who had once prioritized appearance above all else, cradling his grandson as if he were the most delicate, invaluable entity in existence. For a protracted silence, he uttered nothing. Then, softly, his voice faltering in a manner Emma had never previously encountered, he murmured, "He resembles you." Emma's eyes brimmed with tears, not due to a desire for their approval, but because love often navigates tumultuous beginnings to ultimately return home. In that quaint bookstore, where each page murmured of potential, Emma realized that she had not merely discovered freedom that rainy night. She had unearthed everything. Thank you for accompanying us until the final moment of this poignant journey. If you have ever felt alienated in a world that insists on perfection, if you have ever yearned for a love that demands nothing but The narrative of Emma and David serves as a poignant reminder that authentic love transcends status, legacy, or wealth. It resides where one's heart is acknowledged, listened to, and embraced. They transcended barriers, challenged societal norms, and selected one another not for their possessions, but for their true selves. Amidst adversity and fear, they discovered not only love, but also a sense of belonging. If this tale resonated with you, please subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for additional emotionally enriching narratives. We look forward to presenting you with the next story centered on love. It need not be flawless to be authentic, because each moment possesses the potential to transform everything.